And thank you.
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this by saying my flight got in really late this morning, so I've had about 4 hours sleep. And also that this isn't my main area of research. So if I'm talking a lot of nonsense, choose one of those two reasons, as do I. So yeah, I'm going to be focusing on process and output in regards to generative AI. And a lot of this has sort of been covered already in the various talks prior to me. So a common argument I've encountered against AI creativity is that it can't be creative because it lacks the required novelty. By common argument, I mean just out every day talking to people. This is what they seem to say. Um, why have I chosen a common argument rather than like a formalized thing? Well, I just think it's important for philosophy to engage with um, the everyday person. Otherwise, I think it's a bit pointless. We're just academics patting each other on the back, saying how clever we are. But so basic models of AI, like predictive text, may involve a Markov chain. Now that's where one word in the sequence is predicted based on previous ones. And large language models function as similar manner, but with a larger data set of text and code from the internet, which allows for this greater level of complexity and parameters. Now, because this input data is wholly unoriginal, it's not produced by the AI, and the processes involved are formulaic. I think this leads people to say that generative AI is uncreative. So the aims here is to show that this argument is flawed, as I think human creative processes are analogous to that. We also involve plenty of unoriginal data arranged into familiar patterns, and I'm going to use some examples in popular music to demonstrate that. And I think we also seem to judge whether a process itself is creative or at least successful based on the output it produces. And then we may be able to make a claim that generative AI is created in that sense. And I think a better argument would be one based on intentionality if we wish to deny that generative AI is creative. So human processes, I don't think they're completely dissimilar to that of AI. I'm not a blank slate when it comes to creation. I have a lived experience, which, along with its interpretation, fills this function of data set and parameters in my creative process. If we look at music directly, when I create a track, it's often a response to the music I've listened to in the past. There might be a guitar tone I like, a drum pattern that I enjoy, and even genres arise as response to other genres. And another example, the way I write is informed by the books I've read, who inspires me, and the themes of what I write by the life I've lived. And so this data set and its parameters are much more obscure than that of generative AI, I believe. We're not necessarily aware of what's influenced us. Now with generative AI, it is a massive, massive data set, of course, and it would take one person. It probably wouldn't be possible for them to go through it on their own, but it is all there in theory, open to be seen. Whereas my life, there are parts I'll forget. I'm not sure what's influencing me. Regardless, the art I produce is based on this input data of lived experience. And it's much larger and more varied than that of AI, but it still provides us with patterns to work with and examples to draw from. But despite this, we still generally seem to regard ourselves as creative beings. So what's the difference? What exactly is creativity? So I think generally you can break down philosophical theories of creativity into three categories as either being person-based, process-based, or product-based, or some combination. This isn't like, this isn't definitive. It's just general. Person-based, where creativity is within me. There's a set of disposition within me that inspire me to create. Creativity is within a person. There's process-based, where I think can be summarized as being an intentional, non-formulaic process by which a novel idea is successfully realized. So the creativity, the important part is the process. And then there's product-based, where this novel product that's been intentionally produced, that's where the creativity is contained. We judge it on the novelty of this product in a way. So I'm going to be focusing on Lindsay Brainer's theory of creativity a bit, which is focusing on processes. We summarize the sort of creativity as exploration. One goes out into the world and discovers something and creates something in that process. She believes that the creativity of processes is explanatorily prior to that of persons and products. Both can be explained in terms of process, whereas the converse is harder to do. To say if someone's creative, someone who has creative ideas but does nothing with them, we're unlikely to call them creative. They need to go through this process for those ideas to be realized. And obviously a product, the process has to happen first for the product to even exist. She breaks it down into sort of 6 elements. That 1, it's kind of process. 2, it's something only agents can achieve. 3 comes in degrees, so something can be more or less creative. 4, it must be subjectively novel, which just means the idea must be new to the individual. It may have happened in history before, but it's a new idea to the person who's wanting to create. Now 5, she says it must be epistemically valuable. She thinks this is the only value that is necessary for creativity. Now this just means that the individual must gain some understanding of the world as they go through the process. It may have other values. It may be aesthetically valuable, have moral value, or it may even have negative value. It may harm the world in some way. But she thinks that for something to be created, it must have epistemic value. And then number 6, which is what I'll be focusing on, is that it must be non-formulaic, which I don't necessarily agree with. So need we accept creativity as non-formulaic? I think that creativity often utilizes patterns and the following of formulas. If someone's playing the piano and they're reading sheet music, is that act non-creative? I would say that it still is a creative act. There's still this novel instance of the piece being produced, even though it is essentially entirely formulaic. Is baking cake non-creative? If you follow a recipe, I still think it is. There's this novel product that's intentionally produced. Painting by numbers at the extreme end of the scale, I would even go as far as to say that that is creative. I think it's intuitive to say that they're creative, and I think that these are creative acts owing to their novel output, but we might say they're creative to various degrees based on their process. Painting by numbers might be the least sort of creative you can be, but it still is a type of creativity. Now, if we look at examples in music, which is, where I think this is sort of analogous to what an AI is doing of using unoriginal data, there are plenty of examples in music of artists using the work of others to create something new. There's interpolation, where we take an existing melody, use it again. There's sampling, where we take a sound we like from another song and incorporate it into ours. And then there's cover songs, where one artist does a version of another artist's song. And there have also been cases where musicians have unintentionally mimicked other artists' tracks, which I think highlights this lack of awareness of what exactly influences us when it comes to the creative process. An example of that is 9 Inch Nails and Warm Place and David Bowie's Crystal Japan, which they're both good songs. I'd recommend checking them out. Nice little instrumentals. And it seems to me it's unlikely that we would deny these were creative endeavors, even though the processes simply involved reorganizing unoriginal data into a new pattern based on patterns of music with which we are familiar. Music is often structured in a familiar way. It's not structured in an entirely novel way each time. But it's still creative. And I think the output is novel, even if the input data and process are not entirely unique. So some interim conclusions, I think, based on that functions in a similar way to AI, I think that the argument based on its lack of original input data is weak, as human beings also rely on an original data to be able to create. And it seems we also judge something's creativity based upon its output, as well as the processes involved in creation. Generative AI still produces something novel, even if it is formulaic and made of the work of others, if you like. So I think it's still, in some sense, creative. If we want to say that it isn't, I think a better argument is going to focus on intentionality. Now, important to note that novelty isn't creativity, which is a point raised by Richard Taylor in his 1987 article, Time and Life's Meaning. Creativity is more than just something new existing in the world, as novel occurrences in nature frequently. So we have snowflakes, that's the example he gives, which it's entirely mechanistic, and we're unlikely to consider that to be an act of creativity. Why? I think because for something to be creative, one needs to aim to do it. There has to be some sort of forward planning. One sets out to create. There seems to be some level of intention. Now, if we return to Brainerd, I think points 2, 4, and 5 demonstrate this. So creativity is something only agents can achieve. So I think subjective novelty and epistemic value can be categorized in this heading. As only agents can have ideas, so only an idea can be new to an agent. And epistemic value can only be explained in terms of an agent coming to an understanding. But why is it something only agents can achieve? I think she's basically making the claim it is because of intentionality. One has to tend to create. And this seems almost ubiquitous across many different theories of creativity. As generative AI can't currently hold intentions, it can't be creative. It doesn't plan, it just goes through emotions. I think that's a better argument against the creativity of generative AI than one that relies solely upon the processor output. I think we need to take a step back and look before all of that. So some possible responses, ways you could develop this in the future. Could we make the claim that intentions transfer to the AI? Do the intentions of the pianist transfer to the piano? It seems that it'd be hard to make this claim, as we understand intentions as generally involving mental states, which neither pianos or AI can currently hold. However, I think if a person can't create without the required instruments, and it seems there's nothing to be judged as creative, there's no process that can take place. The piano's output is only as creative as the person that's playing it, but the person playing it can't engage in this process without the piano. We might be able to make the same claim of AI, that it's this tool that allows certain people to be creative, which wouldn't be able to otherwise. So it's this combination of human and tool in a larger system that brings about creativity. The sort of functionalism, creativity arises out of this system. Pianos and AI, not creative independently, but they allow for the creativity of a person to be expressed through a process that produces a novel output. I'm sure you all have good criticisms of this. It's not watertight. It's, like I said, it's not my main area of research. So I'd be happy to hear what you have to say. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes, 1 minute for a few questions.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I think one thing I might dispute about what you said was that generative AI currently can't plan. I think if you use a language model that has been produced in the last year, they have functionality that looks like, I mean, if you look at the text that they produce, it's structured to look like planning. These are the sort of chain of thought models, and they will actually describe the plan somewhat for the purpose of like guiding their own output later, but they're sort of trained to do that. They're trained to describe their something that looks like an intention to do something and then actually go and execute it, such as like searching the internet for a specific thing and so on and so forth. So I think that at this point already there is some ambiguity about that, just at like the level of, functionally to us, if we saw a human writing down all the same text, we would say, this is evidence of planning. So I think that might be like at least a gray area in terms of this.
Yeah. No, I do think that's interesting. I suppose my point would be it doesn't plan to plan, but that's also true of humans, right? Which I think brings us into the issue of intentionality. We don't intend to have intentions. Where do they come from? So I think perhaps we can deny on that basis creativity in both humans and AI. I'd be willing to do that. But yeah, that's a fair point.
Yeah, thank you. So if I understand correctly your argument, you claim that AI cannot be creative because there is no intention in the AI, meaning that for AI to create something, there needs to be somebody prompting AI to do so. Now, what do you mean exactly with intention? So if I were to force you to generate something, and as a result of me forcing you, you produce some beautiful music, and everybody in this room agrees that the track you have produced while I was threatening you is beautiful, wouldn't you consider that a creative act or product?
Maybe. I have thought about this, the idea of forcing someone to do something. But it seems, quite possibly we could get rid of intentions, but it seems that generally it seems that your intentions in this case could transfer to me because I can hold mental states. So you are forcing me to do it, but I'm still doing it, and there must be some sort of intention on my part to do it, even if you got me at gunpoint. I might be doing it to, save my life, but it still is my intention. Whereas with AI, does it seem that these intentions could transfer? I suppose that's why I was saying, that could definitely be the case between two human beings, that I can hold these same intentions as you, or some intentions at least, to create. Whereas it doesn't seem that current AI can do that. If that makes sense.
Okay, there's Alessandro there. And last question.
Yeah, thanks. Very interesting. I also have some doubts about this intention idea, also because there's also the black box problem. Like, it makes then the answer into what is a creative act something really unprovable. I just have to have faith in you saying that you were intending to make something creative, which is also not really the case with many artists. I mean, I'm not sure that many artists describe in that way their work. Like, I wanted to do something creative. It's almost never the intention. It's so to say what happens. So maybe you could catch maybe two birds with one stone by changing it with the concept. Like, there is a beautiful concept of formativity, or Gestaltung in German, which has to do with the process. So it's along the lines of your talk, and it has more to do about this experimentation and this, so to say, playing with the process. Whereas it's not important what you aim to do. The thing is simply that you are going in that direction. And also, it solves the problem of the formulaic character. Because, I mean, the problem I wanted to ask you, I mean, retrospectively, anything can be turned into a formula. So that's also a problem. Like, the problem is not whether there is or isn't a pattern or a formula. The problem is how this pattern was structured along the lines of the creative process, so to say. So, because retrospectively, you can always ask how, so to say, and there will always be an algorithm that allows you to reproduce the process, so to say. So maybe you can just, so to say, try and take off the subjective element of intentionality and try and make it into something that has more to do with the process, which is a core element of your presentation. That's my...
Yeah,
I was asking whether you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I think that's solid advice. I mean, like I say, this isn't my main area of research, so I am, very happy to be pointed in a better direction. But yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, we thank Daniel again.